everyone, thanks so much for being here. My name is Kat and I make houseplant videos here on Good and Planty. If you just so happen to absolutely love this video, please consider liking it, commenting, subscribing, or follow me on Instagram. All of these things help me grow my channel like a plant. Apparently I'm an e-girl today. Alright, this video is going to be all about root rot. Wow. And I'm going to be talking about causes, signs, and treatment for root rot. If you don't know, root rot is a disease commonly found in houseplants in which the roots of the plant start to rot and decay. And if there is one thing we know about diseases, it is that they spread. So it is important to take care of root rot if you find it. Root rot sucks. There's really no other way around it. You can have a very happy, big, thriving plant for years and you'll get root rot once and you basically have to start over. So root rot in the more severe cases can definitely be heartbreaking, but there are absolutely ways to kind of salvage the plant and make it healthy once again. Do I hate this? I think I kind of do. What if I tuck this? Usually I do the bandana like when my hair is shorter and I feel like it just looks better. It's fine. We're moving forward. When I decided to do a root rot video, I realized that any root rot that I had experienced so far this winter, I have already taken care of. So I had to go out to the place where root rot thrives like no other, and that is big box stores. So I actually did specifically go to Lowe's and spend my hard-earned money on a plant with root rot intentionally. So here she is. And I'm gonna tell you how I identified a plant with root rot, I hope. People usually identify root rot in the leaves and the stems, which is typically at like a later stage of root rot. So unfortunately, there's no great way to catch root rot early unless you're growing your plant in like a clear nursery pot. So the leaves of a plant with root rot will look somewhat like this. They will be wilty and like very soft to the touch, almost as if they are thirsty. You will definitely get some discoloration with yellowing and some leaf loss. So I'm pretty confident this plant has root rot. That's what the leaves would look like if your plant has root rot, but once you kind of identify those issues, you're probably gonna wanna go ahead and look at the actual roots to confirm whether or not the plant has root rot. So now I am going to take this plant out of its pot and just kind of see what we're working with. I actually had to stop filming because I forgot to take a thumbnail with the potted plant. So here we are. I have my little bin here and I'm just gonna dump this plant into the tub and see what we're working with. Maybe I'll bring you down here actually. I think that's a better idea. First of all, this did not need to be in an 8-inch pot at all. This is just a classic example of big box stores putting small plants in big pots so that they can charge you more. This could have easily fit in like a 6-inch. I'm trying to find the clearest example that I can for you. Oh, here we go. So this has like a little, ooh, this was part of the root. So it's very black, it's extremely soft to the touch, and when I gently tugged at this root here, it just pulled off and I was left with this little tiny hair. I think that you can see it right here. So this is a very typical case of root rot. We have black bushy roots that kind of peel off of the outside and leave like a little tiny bit of root left. And it doesn't have to be all the roots. For example, this piece is kind of normal looking It's not as easy to identify that this plant has root rot based on these roots. It's likely if you take the plant out of the pot, the whole root system doesn't necessarily have to be infected for the plant to have root rot. More roots falling off, you get the idea. So now that I've correctly identified the root rot, I'm gonna make sure that I collect all of the different cuttings, and I'm going to take off as much soil as possible. And I'm gonna check in with you when I have all of these cuttings ready for the next step. Oh, hi, are you curious? Yeah, it's soil. It's soil. Can I film my video? Thank you. Okay, so there we go. We have identified the root rot. The roots are black and mushy. They come off very easily to the touch, and I'm left with very thin, fragile, stringy roots. So that's kind of to summarize what we just looked at. Oh, and the soil is extremely wet. Here are all of my cuttings. You can see that I took off most of the soil. I'm actually gonna switch gears and I'm gonna pause on this little bunch. I'm sure you can kind of already tell what the causes are, but this is an info video, so we're just gonna get into it. I did pick this plant out from Lowe's intentionally because I was fairly certain it had root rot, but once it got home, I actually tried to induce root rot even more. Like, I wanted to make sure this plant had root rot. There are three main causes of root rot that I kind of want to talk about. The first one is kind of like how you pot up your plant. This plant, it had absolutely not a well-draining mix at all. You can barely see any perlite or pumice in there. There is no aeration. I'm pretty sure this is just straight peat with maybe some bark. I have like a random root here for you. Not only is the soil super dense, but this is an 8-inch pot, not porous, so it's also not letting any moisture leave, for a very small root system. So this could have definitely been in a 6-inch pot, but it was in an 8-inch pot with very dense soil, a lot of water, and since this pot is not porous, there was no good way for the excess moisture to quickly wick away. There's a little bit of drainage at the bottom, but that was not going to be enough. The second main reason that root rot occurs is if you are not waiting long enough in between waterings. A lot of the time when people are talking about overwatering, it is not the amount of water going into the pot, because you should have drainage, you should have well draining soil. It's more about waiting an appropriate time between each watering, allowing that soil to kind of dry out and the roots to breathe between waterings. So one more time, it's not about the amount of water going into the pot, it is about the time between waterings. That is overwatering. And the last cause of root rot that I'm going to talk about is actually underwatering, which may be a surprise based on everything that I just talked about. But if you underwater your plant enough, the roots are actually going to shrink down and become fairly brittle. So the next time you go to water your plant might not be able to soak up enough water, and instead it will actually just sit in that wet soil and rot. This is extremely common in houseplants that people say thrive on neglect. So think snake plants, pothos. Those plants, if they don't get enough water because people are like, oh, you only have to water them like once a month, it might be a little bit of an underwatering situation, and then their roots will actually dry up, and then you go to water it and then you have root rot. So to avoid root rot, just make sure that you have a proper pot and pot size, you have well draining soil, and you are waiting enough time between waterings, but not waiting too much. So you're finding the balance of all of that. Now that you've identified your root rot, what do you do about it? The first step, personally, what I like to do is go through and just identify all of the healthy nodes, because if the node has rotted, the entire cutting is a goner. So I'm just gonna go through and check on what nodes are actually savable. For example, this node is very yellow, soft, mushy. I know that this plant is not going to be able to recover because the node is the growth point. So if the node is not healthy, the plant's not healthy. So this I'm going to toss. Then I'm going to go ahead and try to identify what cuttings have a majority healthy root system left and what plants need a full cut, basically. So I'm going to have two little piles. Let me just do that real quick. Okay, so I have two groups of plants now. I have a handful of cuttings that I think are salvageable, and then I have a group of cuttings that I'm just gonna wanna propagate and start over with. So let's talk about both of these methods. For this group, so with these plants, the root system is kind of holding on. There's definitely some rough spots, but I feel confident that the majority of it is all right. I am going to go ahead and wash these under some warm water and clip off all of the pieces that are just not looking too good. They either definitely have root rot affecting them, or I can tell that they're slowly starting to get symptoms. Then I'm going to pot this plant up in a clean pot, so not one that had root rot in it because it can just get root rot again, with clean soil. So I'm also not reusing any of this soil ever. And then water that pot with a mixture of 1 cup of water and 1 tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide. I got these measurements from Betsy Begonia's channel. I wanted to find, you know, a trusted source, I'll say, for this hydrogen peroxide mix, because usually I just go ahead and propagate, I'll be honest with you. So this is gonna be my first time treating with hydrogen peroxide, but I've seen it work for a lot of different people, and that mixture seems to be recommended. If the roots are a goner, the majority is just super weak and frail. You can kind of see here. There's just no point in trying to save any of these roots. You can see how thin and scraggly they are. I am going to honestly rinse them off, cut off all of the roots, and I'm going to propagate them at nodes. So if you don't know what a node is, you can see these little bulges right here with roots growing out of them. These are all different nodes, and you can cut in between the nodes to propagate, and then new roots will grow out of the node. That's the main idea behind propagating. There's a lot of videos out on that if you are new to propagating. But yeah, if the roots are a goner and the root rot is real bad, unfortunately you do have to propagate and start over. So that would be a little bit of a bummer, but unfortunately if you want to save the plant, that's probably like the most trusted way to do so. And of course, with any plant that has root rot, you might have a mix of these two methods, just like I did today. I have some cuttings that I feel comfortable trying to save and leave most of the root system intact, and then I have a couple cuttings that I just feel way better propagating. So if you are really overwhelmed with trying to identify, you know, what cutting is okay to save and what's not, just go ahead and propagate the whole bunch. You don't have to worry about it. If you are comfortable making that identification and you want to try to save it as is, you can absolutely do the hydrogen peroxide method. Okay, so that's gonna be it for today's video. We covered everything root rot. I hope if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer those questions. If you have even more tips or other little hydrogen peroxide recipes, whatever you use to treat root rot, also feel free to drop them down below, because, you know, maybe someone doesn't have hydrogen peroxide and wants a different way to treat their root rot. With all that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more planty content from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!